She now exudes holiness, as you know. Stories about God are never solely about God, and they're never solely about us. They are stories about the terrifying distance and yet incredible closeness between God and us. No God story is more illustrative of this fact than the Transfiguration. It tells of the incredible closeness of Jesus with Peter, James, and John. It tells of God's incredible desire for intimacy by inviting Peter, James, and John into God's presence, where at once they experience that closeness and at the same time that huge difference and distance. We once again discover that as hungry as we think we are for God, we discover that he's so much more hungry for us. We really begin to understand the words of St. Augustine, "My heart is restless, O God, and it will not rest until it rests in thee." God never fails to want to rendezvous with us. In fact, he sets up the situations to rendezvous with us. And as any lover, God desires intimacy. He desires closeness and time together to reveal all the secrets that lovers would share. Unfortunately, we don't always give God the time, the opportunity. We often are too busy, too distracted, too unfaithful, like we are with so many other relationships in our lives. As much as God, the story of the Transfiguration is about God then, but it's also about Jesus Christ, and it's also about us. One early church father, Erasmus, wrote a sermon and said that the Transfiguration is more about Peter, James, and John on Mount Tabor than about Jesus. Today marks the end of the Epiphany season, a time that we discover God being manifest to us personally. One of my sermons, I mentioned that James Joyce calls this season the opportunity for a great discovery of whatness. Epiphany is a season of great discovery of whatness. That we find that about ourselves, this great discovery of whatness. That's what Epiphany is about. It's about us understanding and embracing the manifestation of God in our lives. Sometimes I think that Epiphany is a filler in. Can't think of what else to do today. Shove Epiphany in after Christmas. And then we have Lent, and then we have Palm Sunday and Holy Week, and all the times we give things away, ashes and palms. Then people come back and understand that we go back to Christmas again. The Epiphany season is so important in of itself. It's those months, those 8 weeks that we experience Jesus as the Christ, Jesus as the Lord Christ. And that's such an important season to take a moment to do that. It's a time that we hopefully meet our God and embrace him. I hope that this season of embracing God and feeling him leaves us breathless as we enough to understand the definition and experience of a quick, sudden of whatness. But as much as Epiphany is a time of reconcile and somewhat shocking reality, Christ's birth must also be our death. We must die somehow to those misshaped values we want to live by. We must die to the prejudice that once governed our lives. We must die to the callousness we harbor against some of our neighbors. And it's not only about dying, it's being empowered and emboldened. We must be emboldened. We can't stay silent and content with the world around us. Our country has decided to stop food and medicine in other countries, to stop the medicine and begin a massacre of starvation. A massacre of people has begun. We can't sit complacent. We can't just say, "Oh, that's so sad. Maybe someone will come in and fix that." If we don't, no one else is. Epiphany is a season to also understand the manifestation of God is just not a happy thing. We're not going to the mountain and having a good time. Only is an opportunity to experience the manifestation of God in our lives. We must die in little ways that Christ can be born in us in big ways. Now, Jesus gets really annoyed at his disciples during the Transfiguration. They go down the mountain, and the guy comes up and says, "My son is possessed with demons. Could you cure him?" They tell Jesus, "Your apostles aren't capable of doing it." And Jesus comes down and goes, "What the heck? How long do I have to stay with you guys? I've given you everything, and you still can't do what I asked you. You can heal the sick and raise people's injuries. You can forgive people in God's name. And they forgot that truth, that Epiphany is not just the birth of Jesus, it's also the birth of us and the understanding of Jesus in our lives. I don't know if many of you have gone to the new member luncheon that happens quarterly. Have any of you been that where Laura kind of MCs that experience? Divided new people, divided into tables, and Laura asks a couple questions. She tells me they're Quaker questions, like how was our house heated when we were young? Another one is when have we experienced the warmth of God? When have we experienced the warmth of God? That's what we experienced on Mount Tabor, the presence of God. I told a story that day at that luncheon, my luncheon, the first time I was there, when I experienced God. The first of two times, was that opportunity. The first time was when I was in the seminary, and I was really young. I was about 20 years old. And I went to the chapel at night to pray in the seminary. And as I walked in, there's a Bible in the chapel. And obviously at 2 a.m, it's empty. And I look at the Bible, and it's the story of the prodigal son. And I read the story standing there. And then I went into the chapel into a pew, and there was a Bible, and I picked it up, just opened the Bible randomly. It was the story of the prodigal son. And at once I felt God more powerfully and alive than I ever felt him before. I felt God as real that day in that seminary as this is wood, and that this is, whoa. I was going to say this is water, but you get the point. Most of us have had an experience of God like that. God with us. God with us. The manifestation of God in simple ways in our life we don't even understand. But there's one story I never shared with a group of people. It's the other time. I said there was 2 times I experienced God. The other time was in Zimbabwe, 2008, when we went on a mission, a human rights mission in Zimbabwe. I think I mentioned it once before, to talk about the matter of our being commitment to Jesus Christ. And so, and the second time I shared that story with a story from Zimbabwe. We went with a group of us. It was 2 doctors, one from Johns Hopkins and one from Cape Town, and an epidemiologist that worked for me. And we were confronted with the reality of what Mugabe's all about. We stayed in somebody's home, so we didn't want them people to know we were there. We did this investigation. We were there for about 10 days. There were enough of us to kind of interview torture victims, interview people that were abandoned, and have a chance to get data for a report that was to be issued with Desmond Tutu and Mary Robinson, the president of Ireland. And so we then to Zimbabwe and began that work. And my friend was leaving earlier than us on the plane, and he got to the airport, and he called and said someone at the gate, the airport, and going into security, was there to arrest him because they know everything we did when we were there. Well, if you're arrested by Robert Mugabe, you're never going to see the light of day again. You see the bodies outside the prison are put in positions like firewood, right, left, stacking them together. They're the people that make Mugabe angry. And so obviously we were scared to death. We called Jim McGee, who was the ambassador to the United States at that point, and he said he really couldn't do anything but going to the embassy. We would never be safe. We couldn't stay there that long. So we left to a safe house, the first safe house of 3, where immediately we all have a shot of Irish whiskey because we were a nervous wreck. It had been announced on television that Mugabe had arrested 4 people that were trying to overthrow the government. And so off we went, in one safe car to another over 3 days, where doctors took us on cars to the next location of another safe house where we would be safe, continuing the road to Zambia, which was the only way out of the country for us. We were stopped 3 times by the security forces. And by the I don't know how we got around it, but every time we were given a break and went on to the next point. Eventually, we got closest to the passport entry, from Zimbabwe to Zambia. The guy that was watching the case, the gate where the transit travelers would be going through Zambia, he was totally drunk, watching the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Now it's Christmas Eve, so he's there laughing, drinking, watching the Rocky Horror Picture Show. By the grace of God, we got through into Zambia. The point of the story isn't that we got through. The point of the story is Dr. Louise Lovemore, one of the drivers that took us from safe house to safe house. We got to the hotel in Zambia, and I asked Louise how long it would take her to get home. She said to me, "I don't know if I'll ever make it home." She had been tortured 3 times. You could see the scars on her face. She was imprisoned and raped. And here she was driving total strangers, risking her life for us. She felt it was so important for the story that we were about to tell about human rights violations, that she would die for total strangers, that she was willing to get us out of the country, to save our lives because of the report we were going to issue and because of us. That was the second time I experienced God. That's no water left, but as hard as this wood, as real as this wood. I experienced God and had a quick discovery of whatness. That's what we pray for in Advent, in Epiphany, and that's what happens to us in this season of Lent. We go to a different mountain in Lent. We go to a mountain of prayer and fasting, that we might strengthen our relationship with our lover, with God. Now, every day we have the opportunity, we're confronted with opportunities to be like Francis, love more, to do something for people that we pass every day. Like the guy that sleeps right over there underneath the door outside. You've seen him when you walk past on the street. His name is Roman. A homeless man sleeps in that alcove over St. Andrews. If you walk to this whole Trader Joe's, there's a woman, a Latino woman from Venezuela, that's there with her 2 babies, begging for food. Last time I was there, she asked me to get sweet bread for her baby, so we got some rolls. But how often do we pass a person like that and just move on? And all of those are opportunities for us to meet the living God. All of those are opportunities for our own transformation, our own opportunity to change. If Louise would lose her life for us, as Romans 5 says, it's a good thing it's something that for somebody who loses their life for a friend, if you're willing to lose your life for a righteous person, but nobody would lose their life for strangers, for the unrighteous. But Francis was willing to do that. Jesus was willing to do that, to take risk, because he felt it was so important. Now today, when we leave church here, we're going to be leveled with more people. We're going to turn on the news and see more scandals about what's going on in our country. And to that guy outside Roman, and to that woman at Trader Joe's, and all of us here, we dare not just walk past each other. We dare not let our government do things that are so wrong and be complacent. It's just not happening. We just can't do that. I don't know what we can do, but we need to do something. Maybe today you walk past a black guy wearing crappy old clothes and you know it weren't his. He just happens to be carrying a cross on his back. Would we meet him? Would we die for him? Would we show ourselves to him? Would we help him? That's the story of the transformation. That's the story of the transfiguration. To change. To help that black kid, 30-year-old black kid, carry that cross. Do we have that courage? Do we have the courage to speak out, not just to complain about things our government's doing, but to do something about it? Do we have that courage? May God help us.